What's going on, everybody? Good morning, good evening, wherever you are, and whatever time it is. Welcome back to yet another video with you, man, Immersionholic. And ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 5 of our Carthaginian campaign for Divided Impera Overhaul mod for Total War Rome 2. Today, ladies and gentlemen, we have some interesting developments. In the previous episode, we dealt with the Romans, we pushed them back to central Italy, we liberated these 7 Italians, and so now we're going to focus a little bit more on Africa. This episode is going to be just barely under an hour long, so this was supposed to be an hour-long special. I will be going away this weekend, so I'm not sure when or if I'll be able to do a Carthaginian episode in the next week after this video is published. But anyway, sit back, relax, and I hope you guys enjoy. Getting to it, as I said, we've liberated 7 Italy. We have Cosentia and Taurus that are liberated. They're both now city-states. Taurus belonging to the Greeks, and Cosentia belonging to the 7 Italians themselves. They have been pretty active in fighting against Rome. They've been sending armies up there, and they will continue to do so throughout this episode. The Romans are looking extremely weak, and if we wanted to be honest, we could probably end them right here and now. But wiping out the Romans is not the goal of the Carthaginians. There's no real profit in that, and central Italy kind of just opens us up to further issues in the north. And you can see the Romans still have quite a lot of territory up there in the north. Further east, so at Apollonia, the Romans still hold Apollonia and the rest of Greece. The other thing that they don't hold is Macedonia and further territory in that direction, but they have Larissa, Athens, and Sparta under their control. We're going to begin the episode by pulling our forces back. The 3rd Republican Fleet, led by Macinthen of the Mageddon Dynasty, will retreat back towards Sicily, where it will be mainly used as a patrolling naval force for the moment. In addition, we still have our armies pulling back. So Gisgo will also be retreating with his Hananid army. They took severe losses in the most recent battle we had with the Romans, and although they did emerge victorious, they are paying dearly for that victory. So they're going to pull back to Sicily, and Gisgo's army is going to be cut down severely to reduce the upkeep requirements. Meanwhile, Hannibal, aka the grandfather of the Hannibal, keep in mind, is going to pull back all the way into Africa, and he's going to be sent on an assignment to deal with the Garamantians. They have been harassing our Numidian allies for some time. They've even taken that city of Dimidi to the west. They have some armies out here. You can see me circling to show off to you, and they also have their major city of Garama deep in the African hinterland. So we'll be focusing on that in this episode. Another thing we have to deal with is pirates. They are a constant menace throughout this whole campaign, and we'll see multiple hordes of them spawn in this episode alone. We currently have a single major fleet just north of Africa now across the coast. Meanwhile, Western Iberia and Africa is looking pretty chill. We still have our governors in the major cities in the area. Public order is well under control. They are also providing solid taxes, and overall, there's nothing really happening. The Iberians are busy with their infighting, although they are facing an external threat. In the meantime, we just have our governors focusing on the yellow ancillaries here, the yellow cards. The majority of these focus on increasing your wealth through trade, industry, commerce, whatnot. It also provides a little bit of extra food, and possibly most importantly, it helps with public order, because we do have some issues with that at the beginning of the campaign. You can see the rest of Iberia is still very much fractured. No one tribe has risen to the top just yet. We see the Massalians over here at Tarraco. Quite concerning, although they aren't hostile to us, so we do have trade with them. We don't have a non-aggression pact. They won't take that yet, as will most factions don't want non-aggression with us. You can see they have quite a few armies, so that could be an issue. But for now, like I said, they're still kind of sticking to their own thing. They're focusing on fighting the Iberian tribes in the region, but they may prove to be a rival when we finally begin to expand west. We have a major setback at the beginning though, and that is the Carthaginian pirates with their massive navy are going to attack the city of Acragas in southern Sicily. This is a big deal because the garrison that we have there is nowhere near big enough to handle such a massive naval invasion. The majority of the naval ships have marines on them, and these guys are very strong, very well equipped. So because of that, we're just going to auto-resolve it and lose Akragas to the pirates immediately. This is really going to hamper our operations in Sicily, at least in terms of public order, because we only just recently conquered Akragas back from the Sicilians. Shouldn't be the end of the world though, and the fleet that just took Akragas will actually move on towards southern Italy, but we have the Third Republican Fleet stationed, will actually preparing to move back towards Sicily, so it's good timing. We're just going to auto-resolve that battle away though. There's no way I could do very well in that battle, and the auto-resolve will give it to us. So we will enslave the captives, and then the retreating forces of the pirates will try to return back to Sicily. They try to run, but the Second Republican Fleet, led by Hanno of the Hannoid dynasty, Hanno, shocker, will finish off the navy, and it will return to march on Akragas itself. So thankfully Akragas is taken back in a single turn, but the public order of the area will definitely be a bit of an issue for the next few turns at the very least, possibly even further depending on the damage the pirates did while they had the city under their control. But they are wiped out. They will of course be crucified on the outskirts of Akragas to try and dissuade any further pirates from rising up. Meanwhile though, in Africa, we have Hannibal's army finally down here. And after several turns of marching, Hannibal is getting a little bit old, and instead of marching with his army, he's actually going to be retiring from military life temporarily, so his son Hamilcar can now take the lead. That's right, this is the infamous Hamilcar, who was the father of Hannibal and who led a very successful campaign against the Romans in Sicily. Unfortunately, that was during the First Punic War, and he wasn't able to get any direct victories against the Romans. But in this, he is going to be focusing on attacking the Garamantians to our south. There's two major settlements that we need him to go tackle. Hopefully Hamilcar will be able to live up to the challenge. While Hamilcar is doing that, Hannibal would become a governor in the city of Carthage itself. It's time we gave a little bit more special interest to our core region, so he'll be focusing on economy and public order in the region. Hamilcar has a very well-trained army under his command. Even though he is a new commander, his father was excellent and did very well in southern Italy and in Sicily. So we're hoping Hamilcar can follow in his footsteps. We end up offering the Numidians for our armies to join the war against the Garamantians, as long as they pay a small fee, of course. Carthage is definitely always going to take whatever money you can get. The Numidians are more than grateful to pay for our services, and with that the Garamantians retaliate immediately by sending their army to attack Hamilcar and his army of mainly Italians. This is going to be very interesting. Hamilcar is now tested in his first ever battle of the campaign. Let's jump in the battle and see how Hamilcar Barca survives against the Garamantians. The battle begins with our new Midian cavalry scouting ahead, using the terrain to try and hide out of line of sight. Very beautiful terrain. I'm loving these graphic ones we're using. Hopefully you guys are too. The Numidians aren't the most heavily armored units, but they're very fast, and they also have the stalk ability, so they can move forward like this, use the terrain to their advantage, and get us a far line of sight, much further than what our regular army would. We begin to see enemy troops way off in the distance there, and you can see to the right hand side over here we have our own army marching forward. So let's go take a look at that. As we get closer, you can see we're in a pretty standard formation, two sets of wings on either side, and in the center will be our main front line. Very gorgeous looking battle here though. The dust is looking very nice. We also have very good looking units. We have Samnites, we have Italians, as in like Brutian Italians. We then also have some Iberians, and then in the center here we have Hamilcar himself leading his personal bodyguard. This is a Carthaginian personal bodyguard unit, of course. Here's Hamilcar. We zoom in a little. He hasn't got himself a helmet yet. Still a young man. He's only 17 at this time, but hopefully he will get married soon and give birth to the infamous Hannibal. Hannibal, the, dare I say, great. First off though, let's look at the battle formation. On the left hand side we have many of our Iberians. We have some archers behind them, And then we also have our Carthaginian cavalry, which is our Libyan-Phoenician blend. In the center, we have our Brutine infantry again. And then on the far right-hand side, we have some Iberian mercenary infantry units as well. These guys aren't the best Iberians we can get access to, but they're still pretty solid, and they should prove to be quite the match for the Garamantians. Behind them, we have archers, just 2 sets of them. And then in the far rear of them, we have our Samnite cavalry. These are specifically Samnites, not other Italians. And these guys are actually really, really good. And you're going to see how well they perform in future battles. But despite them looking not all that armor, they actually have very high armor stat. They have large shields. They have very good attack. They're just going to be a fantastic melee cav unit for us throughout the campaign whenever we get to use them. So we're going to try and hold on to them for as long as we can. In the center, we have our personal bodyguard, and in the rear behind him, we have our elephants. Of course, a set of 18 elephants right here, ready to march against the Garamantians. Although they will have their own elephants as well, and we can't dissuade or ignore them at all. Speaking of which, let's have a quick look at the battlefield. We have the enemy elephants at the front of their line. Behind them, they have skirmishers, which is an interesting choice. And then behind them, they have spearmen in the center. Left-hand flank has a couple units of swords. Then the far right-hand flank doesn't have swords, but it does have cavalry. And we will actually see even more cavalry pop up on the left-hand side, but they're currently hidden. And then we, of course, have the Garamantian general. This is not their king. It's just a general. He's in the center right there with the leopard skin around his shoulders and sword in hand on the black horse. Looking pretty lethal. Dare I say, a veteran general. He's been fighting the Numidians for many years now, if not decades. So the only addition we do to our formation is that we put the archers in the center back there, as you saw. Then we begin the battle by sending forward all of our cavalry, including Hamilcar himself. He wants to lead his cavalry forward to try and draw out the Garamantian Midian CAV. If we can draw them out, separate them from the main body of the army, we may be able to surround them and engage them in melee, which is where we're going to shine. We do have our own skirmisher cav, which is getting quite hit, getting a fair bit of damage despite actually leading the enemy cav away. You can see that we're trying to circle back towards where our melee cav are, and the red arrows indicate where our melee cav will have their trajectory based on. We end up slamming into the Garamantians. We have a little bit of a sandwich here, so more of an L shape, but it's good enough. They're going to get hammered on that. However, they do have more cavalry that will splinter off from the army and come and help. Meanwhile, on our right-hand flank, we have 2 sets of cavalry that are coming at our Samnites, and they're actually splitting up and doing a very interesting kind of attack style where they're charging right at us, but they're moving left to right while they do so. Unfortunately, our cavalry units on the right don't have any javelins, so they are going to take a fair bit of damage while they try to pull them back. Meanwhile, back towards the center, the enemy main army is about to engage. The enemy elephants get within range of our units, and thankfully, because we moved all of our archers to the center, they are going to do massive amounts of damage to the 2 sections of enemy elephants. Fortunately, one of them was already somewhat depleted. The other one right here, though, with the towers, is full, so they are going to unfortunately make it to our lines. Despite all of our infantry actually having javelins and our archers targeting them, the elephants do get in and do a fair bit of damage. They disrupt our line, and then the enemy infantry follow up with a charge right behind them. Although the elephants do fall pretty quickly, all things considered, our Numidian archers definitely help out massively with that. Perhaps if we had javelins it would be a little bit better. But anyway, many of the elephants are dying, but not after they disrupt our battle lines. Garamantian infantry is engaging with our Italians in the center. The Italians are actually pretty well disciplined, and they're quite well equipped considering they're pretty early on in the campaign, so that's very nice. They're not Romans, they are just Southern Italians. You can see though the rest of the main front line has been completely engaged. Our left and right hand flank is getting hit pretty hard by skirmisher fire. The javelin of the Garamantians is actually quite accurate and deadly, so we're going to be sending forward Iberian infantry on our left-hand flank to try and push forward alongside our cavalry. Oh, sorry, that's our Italian mercenaries on the left-hand flank. We did send out around 1 unit of Iberians, but they will get caught up dealing with the cav. So some Italians and Iberians on the left. Meanwhile, deep behind the enemy formation, our cavalry specifically our Libyan Phoenician CAV right here, is trying to hunt down the enemy general. They did damage to the enemy CAV, but not enough, so they are still riding around looking to cause damage. Moving forward, we have our own elephants flanking behind the enemy's main front line. They are completely fresh. They haven't been engaged in anything until they did this charge, so they're going to get a lot of kills, and they should deal a lot of morale damage. Although the 1.3 DEI patch elephant is a little bit bugged, and their mass is not as it should be, so they aren't getting the kills that they should. But they will deal massive amounts of morale damage, and they will help us run down the enemy. You can see the enemy units are wavering across the entire board just about. The only area where they're not is back here, where Hamilcar himself is isolated and fighting off multiple units. He's taking on 3 units of skirmishers completely on his own, although he does have friendly swordsmen finally catch up and engage in the fighting as some Italian mercenaries coming in here. Very brutal hand-to-hand combat here, and although the skirmishers don't have spears, thankfully, they do have a lot of numbers. But while Hamilcar was running down the skirmishers, the rest of the main front line has essentially been completely obliterated. The rear charge of our elephants combined with our very disciplined Italian swords and mercenaries has proven to be more than a match for the Garamantians. And we have this final charge coming in, where we have one of our units of cavalry sandwiching an enemy spearman unit alongside of our elephants. And the Garamantians simply cannot handle it. They will retreat off the battlefield, their general will be killed, and that is that, ladies and gentlemen. With that, Hamilcar wins his first ever battle and proves himself worthy of leading Hannibal's elite army. And there we have it, a decisive victory. We did take some losses, mainly around our cavalry. The Numidians and Libyan Phoenicians got hit pretty hard. Their armor isn't all that high, and they just don't have the skill that the Samnite cavalry does. So the Samnites are definitely going to be a priority for us to keep. Our Italian swordsmen did fantastic, including the mercenaries. The Iberians took some casualties, but overall this army is working out very well so far. As I said, a decisive victory, and the entire enemy army is wiped out, and we will enslave the captives and send them to the markets of Carthage. In the very next turn, we will launch an attack against the city of Tidamensi, owned by the Garamantians at this point. I wanted to auto-resolve, but I didn't because of the losses we would take, so I fought it manually, but it's not worth showing you guys. We wiped out the enemy garrison for almost no cost at all, only losing 39 men, which is nothing in the grand scheme of things. So, the Garamantians take a pretty big loss early on. They lose a massive army, and they lose one of their 2 major settlements. They did lose a settlement that was further west, bordering the Numidians, so now we just have to take their capital.
My lord looks to end the war. He will not look to end it another time.
They come groveling for peace as soon as their town falls. The Carthaginian Senate did debate on making the Garamantians a client state, but at this point it just wasn't worth it, and so we are going to reject any forms of peace, and instead of trying to go down the client state or military ally way, we're just going to simply take over their territory and gain command entirely of the inner interlands of Africa here. The Garamantians send forward one of their next biggest armies that they have, although the army itself isn't as good as the previous one, and despite being in a fortified stance, we will attack and wipe them out yet again. We get a decisive victory. Again, I fought this battle manually, but it's not really worth showing you guys. We have something a little bit more important coming up. But Hamilcar is again proving himself to be an excellent commander, perhaps worthy of becoming the supreme commander of Carthaginian military forces. After a couple turns of recovering, he marches straight towards the Garamantian capital. They have a massive garrison here, and they have a small army that is in the process of being recruited, with some elite spearmen, which could be a concern. Hamilcar surrounds the city, begins a siege, and as he's constructing his siege weapons, the Garamantians come outside of their city walls and attack Hamilcar head on. Now, let's fight for for the deserts of northern Africa. And here we are yet again on the battlefield, ladies and gentlemen. We have a few battles today. This one will decide the fate of the heart of Africa. The Garamantians have no further armies, no further settlements, so hopefully Hamilcar can prove himself yet again. He's changing up his formation slightly compared to before. In his center, he has his Iberians. On the far left or on the mid left and mid right actually, he has his Italian mercenaries. Just one unit each on either side of the Iberians. Behind them, he has more Numidian archers. On the far left hand side, he has his Brutian infantry, followed up by a combination of the Samnite cavalry and the Libya-Phoenician cav. Because the Libya-Phoenicians perform so poorly, they're going to have backup from the Samnites. On the right hand flank, we have two more sets of Brutian infantry, although we have a newly recruited Libyan swordsman unit, so hopefully they will be up to the task of supporting our other swordsmen. And then we have the same mixture of cavalry, and then we have elephants in the rear, and I do this so they can go right, left, or they can go up the center. Keeping them deep in our reserve obviously makes them a lot more flexible than putting them on a certain flank or in front of our army. And then we of course have Hamilcar in the center. The Garamantians, as I said, have a massive army inside of their city, so they are all coming down in a really, really large horde down a very large hill slope. A lot of big things happening in this battle, everyone. They do only have a couple of sections of enemy CAVs, so that shouldn't be too much of a problem for us. Although we will have to try and surround them and engage them in melee as soon as we can. Although up here in the rear, we do see something we haven't seen yet, and that is chariots. We haven't dealt with any chariots yet so far in the campaign. The Garamantians are the first to bring it out on the battlefield, and we can see why we haven't actually seen much of it in the campaign, because they look pretty bad. They're very weak, made out of only small timber. It's only one person on each chariot. They're not really going to do too well. So we'll have our archers target them when they do get in range. Our army stays very well disciplined and holds its nerve against the onslaught of the Garamantian horde. They hold at the bottom of this long slope right here, so the Garamantians have to make their way down and waste their energy marching through the hot sun. We begin the battle by immediately swinging our cavalry out far to the left and far right, instead of keeping them behind our infantry. They will, as I said earlier, try to focus on drawing out the enemy cav. We then push forward our center and our left slowly. There's no rush to do it, and we want to bring the Garamantians in the range of our archers. Then follow that up with the right hand flank. They'll be pushing forward slowly again. And our archers begin firing as soon as the enemy is within range, although shortly after they do a few barrages, we will have them target the enemy chariots once they're in range. The main front line, though, it begins to engage by throwing their javelins at the enemy. You can also see the enemy chariots are getting hit hard by our archers, and they take losses almost immediately within the first volley. We have 3 sets of archers at this point, so it is quite a lot of arrows that are coming in flying on them. And we also have 1 unit of Garamantian skirmishers that is already running away. Garamantian spearmen and swordsmen begin pushing through the skirmisher ranks, and they will charge directly against our own men. Thankfully, our men have expended their ammunition, and they will get a solid front charge against the Garamantians. Again, our Iberians are in the center, so our more reliable Italians are on the far left and far right hand side, so we're expecting the flanks to do well, while our center may give way if they are not supported quickly. Meanwhile, our cavalry are chasing away the enemy skirmisher camp, although they are trying to draw us out, so we will have one of our units stop pursuing while the other surrounds. So we will capture them shortly, though. It shouldn't be too much of an issue. Left hand flank is looking to be about the same story, except they do have 1 unit of skirmishers that is trying to help them, so we've got to deal with that pretty quickly. But our cavalry should do a solid recharge and get them off the field shortly after. The enemy chariots actually break through our line where there's a small gap between the Iberian groups. Thankfully, though, we have Hamilcar with his personal bodyguard right here, and our archers have been doing massive amounts of damage to the enemy general. He will rout off the battlefield, and he will not be coming back anytime soon. He is shattered. So now his infantry are left completely on their own. We have our elephants charge into the right hand side of the center through a small gap you can see along that red line, and with that one single charge we rout almost a dozen units off the battlefield. Our elephants are doing massive amounts of damage, just by getting these routes, they don't even have to get the kills. Just routing so many men allows our troops to begin running them down and getting easy kills that way, with little risk to themselves. Our elephants, though, will not begin pursuing the enemy immediately. Instead, they will continue marching down the line, stampeding enemies that are foolish enough to run in front of them. Speaking of which, we have a enemy spear unit charged directly towards our elephants. And although they are spearmen, they are extremely out of position. They're lightly armored, so they're going to be made short work of. Hamilcar now begins to personally get involved in the fighting by attacking the enemy in the center. He's trying to get some charges in, although it's a little bit awkward with the angle. And then our elephants will be chasing down enemy skirmishers as well, who have been harassing them almost non-stop, although I don't believe we lost any elephants, at least not yet at this point. You can see our riders are throwing down javelins as they're pursuing the enemy. We had a few enemy units just tank a few shots in the head there, interesting. But once they deal with that, they come back and do a massive rear charge towards the enemy center. And with this center now completely destroyed and in utter disarray, really, the enemy force begins to rout entirely. Hamilcar leads his personal bodyguard in pursuit of the Garamantians, and once again we try to rout and kill them all down to a man. And here are these statistics if you'd like to see them. You can see one of our Italian mercenary units did get hit pretty hard. A couple of our Brutian infantry units did as well. But they all did well in terms of kills. The Iberians actually held really well. It was kind of surprising. Just our whole army is doing great so far. I'm very impressed with the units that we have. And it's really cool to see that the Italians that we liberated from southern Italy are very grateful for our intervention in Italy. And thus they serve us well here in Africa, far away from their homes. We kill the remainders of the Garamantians, take over their capital, and that will be it once we auto-resolve the units that manage to escape back inside the city. We have a decisive victory, and the Garamantians are completely wiped out.
At your command.
Even though we had a war target, the Midian allies we had were pretty useless and didn't help us much at all. But now we have bigger fish to fry. We have more pirates spawning off the coast of Africa yet again. This time just a little bit west of Cyrene, aka Cyrenaica. Thankfully, Hanno is in close position to this set of pirates that have just been spawned and come out from the shadows. So he will go forward and auto-resolve them away pretty easily for very few losses. But again, we will see many more pirates throughout this episode, which is very frustrating, but it is what it is. It doesn't seem to be anything we can do to stop them. We just need to counteract them as soon as they do come in. While he's doing that, though, we have the 3rd Republican fleet stationed in Carthage. It will be coming down towards Leptis, where it will be potentially ferrying our troops around. It's time to bring Hamilcar back up north, and he will be receiving a brand new assignment and new command overall, as he did very well fighting the Garamantians in Africa, although he will need a few more turns to recover his troops, replenish his forces with the foreign population that we have in droves, really, throughout our entire empire so far. But the idea is to get Hamilcar on the fleet at Leptis, and then sail far northwest around the city of Carthage itself, maybe stop in for some food and drink, have a good night there, and then continue sailing further west past Iole, and then land up here in what will eventually become New Carthage. And so in the city there, he will organize it to be a new headquarter region, and then he will begin expanding into Iberia in any direction he chooses. Basically, Hamilcar will now be given the entire military command of Iberia, and it will be up to him to lead the Carthaginian cause there. While we've been fighting in Africa, Italy is starting to look pretty interesting. The southern Italians have been trying to fight the Romans, although they've actually suffered a fair few losses, but they still have their armies around. We also have our Sicilian Punic ally that we liberated sending forces up there towards Rome. So all three sides are forming a little bit of a southern Italian / Punic confederation. It's been going okay. They did manage to take Beneventum, but the Romans never give up and they constantly refuse peace. So despite us not seeing really any military forces from the Romans, that is going to be concerning. And as I said before at the beginning of this episode, they still hold on to Greece, and they are right now at this point. So with Greece being under Roman control, under a firm Roman control that is, there have been many Greeks sent out into exile. And so what the Carthaginian Senate has been debating is, should these Greeks be reached out to? And if they are reached out to, what can they provide for Carthage? And so what the Senate finally agreed to do is go ahead and hire a Greek general. Not any specific general, we just put out a call for all able-bodied men to come to Carthage to help us fight against the Romans, possibly to liberate Greece in a very large military operation. And, of course, within the next turn we immediately receive a response from an exiled Spartan general known as Xanthippus. Xanthippus is supposedly an excellent general, and he seems to prove himself quite worthy of leading our forces very early on, as the Senate unanimously votes to grant him military forces to lead an expedition into Greece itself. He arrives in Carthage, does whatever politics he needs to in addressing the Senate. He then equips himself with a Carthaginian maid Sarissa. He'll also have a heroic hoplite as a very close friend and companion of his who will help his spear units do very well, and he will also have some extra help in maintaining mercenaries and their costs. So Xanthippus will of course be recruiting a Greek-inspired or Greek-based on army. He was offered any choice of Carthaginian cavalry under his personal bodyguard, yet instead the Spartan general instead preferred to use hoplites, of course, as he should. He is a Spartan after all, and they look down upon cavalry with pretty negative outlook. So he will recruit his own personal bodyguard that he picks handedly, and then he will begin recruiting troops into his army. He has heard the tales of the Greek style of fighting that the Carthaginians have used against the Romans. He's heard that our hoplites did fantastic against the Romans, and so he's going to recruit a hoplite-based army. There will be some auxiliaries in the mix, and you will see them as the episode progresses. Meanwhile, Hamilcar is sent northwest on his assignment. He'll be sailing along the African coastline where needed. Although we do have some interesting developments coming up shortly. You can see here, though, Xanthippus is starting to recruit some Iberians that will act as auxiliaries on his flanks. He's going to be using at least 4 sets of the newly recruited mercenary Greek hoplites that we haven't ever used before. He'll also be getting a couple units of Carthaginian Sacred Band alongside some Libyan Phoenician hoplites. They aren't our best hoplites, but they are very, very solid. However, in the meantime, Italy begins to rise from its turmoil. Italy has been having these events of Italy in turmoil sporadically throughout the last probably 20 turns or so. And so when those pop-ups appear, the Romans get an entirely fully formed legion spawned in. And so you just saw me circle it up in the north there for you at Ariminum. They have brand new armies coming down to the south, and thus they may present a massive threat to our southern Italian allies. It's going to be very interesting to see exactly what happens there. Meanwhile, while Hamilcar stops in the city of Carthage to gather supplies for his men, he actually ends up marrying a Carthaginian noblewoman. She's very influential. She's a little bit older than him, just by a few years, but that's okay. They seem to be very happy with their marriage, and may Baal bless them with many sons to fight the Romans, of course. Meanwhile, though, the pirates once again spawn another massive horde just north of Carthage itself at this time, so that's going to be quite concerning. To try and deal with this, Hamilcar is actually going to begin marching his army west along the land route towards Iberia, and while he does that, the Carthaginian navies that we have at our disposal will scramble to try and deal with this pirate threat, because if the pirates are left unchecked, apparently they'll just go ahead and attack our coastal cities, which is absolutely unacceptable. We can't allow Acragas to fall just because our navies were busy babysitting some land units that needed a ride to Iberia or to Greece. The second and third fleets managed to surround the pirates, although the pirates will barely be able to slip the blockade and escape from the fight initially early on. Although our fleets will be instructed to continue to pursue them way further away from Corsica and Sardinia, That way they become a problem for the Massalians rather than for us. We don't really care if they're raiding trade up that way. We do have trade with the Massalians, but right now we just want to get rid of the pirates as much as we can. And we need our naval forces back down in Africa, trying to transport our armies around. We still need to try and prepare our Greek expedition alongside getting Hamilcar into Iberia. However, we then have a major political development with the RDI attacking the Lucani, which is one of our Italian allies. The RDI have a couple allies themselves, and they're actually very, very powerful at this point. And we don't really want to betray our southern Italian friends, thus dissuading them from wanting to help us in the future. So what we're going to do after much debate is enter the war with the Lucanians against the Illyrians in Italy. And so with war declared, we start to take a little bit of a look around the Adriatic in Greece. We see there is a massive RDI fleet in the Adriatic right now, and in southern Italy, somehow the Romans are coming back with a vengeance. They have at least 3 pretty much full-strength legions ready to march south, and a couple more that are on the way. And this has all just happened within a matter of a couple turns. You can see how fleets are returning from hunting down the pirates in the north. So it looks like Rome is coming back hard, and we are essentially getting into full swing of the second Punic War. Even though we officially didn't get into peace after the first one, after we pulled back our troops, I essentially considered the first Punic War over with. So now Gisco, stationed in Sicily, is going to try and recruit some troops again. It's been probably about almost 10 years or so since he's had a full army, so it's been quite a while. It's going to take some time. But thankfully our mercenaries will be able to supplement our ranks pretty quickly. We also have had the Furious reforms come and go, so that's why we now have access to some more units such as the mercenary Greek hoplites and a few others that we'll be throwing inside of the army. We also have our ally stationed in Panormus, the Punic settlement up there that's allied to us, so hopefully they'll be able to help us deal with the Romans, but you can see them marching back south pretty quickly. Gisco's army grows kind of quickly. He ends up recruiting a lot of Sicilians, of course, because he's stationed in Sicily. While he's doing that, the RDI have 2 massive fleets on the way now. It looks as if they're going to make a run for Sicily, but we're not really too sure. We'll have to monitor them as time goes on. Meanwhile, Cassentia is about to fall to the Romans. They have 2 massive legions stationed just outside its city, and Taurus will be shortly behind. Xanthippus is now ready with his massive army. It's completely recruited. While it's not the most experienced army, it is very well equipped and well trained, so it should do really, really well against the Romans or whoever it is he ends up fighting against. We send the fleet north, the second fleet led by Hanno, back towards Sicily to try and help out a little bit up there. The plan for the moment was to send Xanthippus up to Sicily to try and aid Gisco in holding off the Romans. However, the Romans seem a little bit more interested in holding on to southern Italy. They've now taken Taurus, thus killing our Greek city-state ally. Cassentia is on the verge of falling, as I said before. Meanwhile, back west towards Iberia, Hamilcar is about to make landfall, although Iberia has been ravaged by the pirates that we initially chased off earlier. They've actually come back and they've been raiding outside the Balearic Islands, so that's disrupting our trade and causing major public order issues in the area. So the third Republic Fleet will try to recruit some more ships and go and deal with those pirates on their own. Here you get to see even more units from the Furious reforms. We're going to be getting some Libyan Furious infantry, pretty helpful overall. And the second Republican fleet will be trying to keep the area secure while also trying to escort troops over to Sicily, as we are expecting the war to vamp up pretty hard around Sicily. It seems like the Romans aren't going to be trying to outflank the island just yet. Hamilcar finally makes landfall. He will be leading his army off the ships, and he'll be stationed just outside the city of Mastia, which will be his new Iberian capital. There's some interesting units he can recruit, such as multitude of elephants and chariots, in addition to some other really cool units, so we'll be trying to pick and choose what we want to use in the near future. But we can see now, finally, Cassentia has fallen. The Lucani are wiped out. Their leaders have been crucified as an example to all other southern Italians to not side with Carthage. Tyros has fallen, as I said before, and the legions who recently just conquered the city are already sailing towards Greece and Apollonia. We're not really sure what they're planning on doing, but they are patrolling the region. They also have the RDI hanging out just outside of their cities. They're not allied to each other, but it could cause issues. Basically, we have no idea what's going on in the east in terms of Roman expansion. All we know is that they hold Greece. So we'll have to try to do some investigating. The RDI fleets continue to stay stationed in their ships just off the coast of southern Italy, poised ready to attack Sicily. Perhaps if we let our guard down, we won't be letting that happen. However, there's been a change in plans for Xanthippus. Instead, he'll be sending his army back east to Cyrenaica, aka Cyrene. From there, he'll be sailing on a small navy, hopefully with our major navy providing escort, the second navy that is, and that will invade Sparta. And from Sparta, they will then use the choke points throughout Greece to basically hold the Romans at bay while we slowly and methodically take over and liberate Greek cities. At least that's a plan. You can see we have our small navy being built, and then we have the second Republican fleet coming in to deal with a small RDI fleet that's been kind of patrolling the North African coast. Once we do that, we will sail north. Hanno charges directly at the RDI, and being the cowards they are, they flee off the battlefield instantly. So he actually clears away at the very least, so now he'll go ahead, just wait outside the port of Cyrene. Meanwhile, Xanthippus, with his army full of hoplites and excellent Iberian infantry and skirmishers and some Midian CAV, will now finally board the ships, and the expedition into Greece will begin. I did change my mind. I wanted him to go to Sicily initially, but one of the deals, or one of the aspects of the deal of Xanthippus serving Carthage, is that he will lead a liberation of Greece. And once he does lead that liberation, he will be given command of Greece itself, basically becoming the tyrant of Greece. At least that is the goal for him. We shall see if he lives long enough to be able to hold up to that little aspect of the bargain that the Carthaginian Senate has promised. The navies begin sailing straight north towards Sparta while we're trying to hold our position in Sicily. We're basically trying to open up a brand new front against the Romans, divide their forces further, because in a one-on-one engagement, our armies seem to beat theirs every single time. So if we divide their forces, then it increases our chances heavily of winning the war. The second Republican fleet chases off any RDI ships in the area. Sparta is looking pretty open for a taking. They have a medium-sized garrison there. Nothing too substantial, but enough to give our troops a little bit of concern. We send spies throughout all of Greece to determine what exactly the Romans are up to, and so far they're not really finding anything too useful. So Xanthippus lands on the shores of Laconia, ends up marching up the valley directly towards the city of Sparta itself. They do have, like I said, a pretty substantial garrison in place. It's not a massive one, but it is a Roman garrison, and Roman troops definitely need to be respected. Not feared, but at the very least respected. So our fleets that we have recruited will be sent back towards Sicily. The transport fleet will be disbanded when necessary. And then the second fleet will go about chasing down Roman legions who are still sailing in between Tyros and Apollonia. But you can see there's no troops near Crescentia, so it seems like the Romans aren't in a rush to try and get into Sicily. Meanwhile, Xanthippus is not going to sit around and let his troops suffer and die to disease from a siege. Instead, he's going to go straight ahead and lead the liberators of Greece, the best Carthaginian army yet assembled, down the streets of Sparta itself. Let's do this, everybody. Here we are on the battlefield. Thousands of hoplites march directly towards the city, not concerned about the Roman garrison that will be standing before them. Xanthippus, a very experienced Spartan general, living in exile now, marches back to liberate his homeland. We're fighting just outside a very nice villa out here, perhaps once owned by Perioikoi, now owned by Roman senators, just outside the city. They now use as merely a little tourist location. Sparta doesn't really have all that much strategic value to the Romans. They're just occupying it just because that is what Romans do. We can't see the enemy army in the distance, so we're going to continue sending scouts ahead while our army marches forward in a column. You'll notice that we're not in just a massive wide formation ready for battle. Instead, because we can't see the enemy, we're going to be marching forward slowly. At the front, though, we have mercenary Scutari, aka pretty heavy Iberian infantry. These guys will be the first time we're using this unit in battle. We haven't been able to recruit them because they come from our mercenary barracks, so we've only just got them in the army. They are very, very well skilled, very aggressive, but they still have large shields and good armor, so we expect lots of high kills from them. Behind them in the second row, we have our Libyan Phoenician hoplites. You guys have seen them in action multiple times now, and every single time they fought against the Romans, they've done fantastic. Very, very good at holding, and once they tire out the enemy, they'll get some very nice kills. So hopefully they can continue to demonstrate the power of hoplite warfare and the might of the Punic armies. Behind them, though, we have mercenary Greek hoplites. These guys are a type of hoplite we have not yet seen in battle. They are again recruited from our mercenary barracks. These guys seem to be pretty solid, although they do have lower stats than the Punic units that we use for the same role. So it's unlikely they'll do as well as our Libyan Phoenicians, but we'll have to wait and see on that. Behind them, though, we have yet another section of infantry. We have our Balearic Slingers. These bad boys will deal some serious damage from a far distance. Again, recruited from our mercenary barracks. Thank God we actually got that together, because we're going to need some skirmishes to try and deal with the Roman velites. Then towards the rear of the formation, we have our Carthaginian Sacred Band. 2 units of them. These guys are the best of the best when it comes to Carthaginian hoplites and elite troops. Basically, they are Carthaginian triarii. They should do very, very well against the enemy and be nearly impossible to break. Although, this will be their first time we see them in combat. But man, they're looking fantastic. Unfortunately, the weather was really bad, but it's the best weather we could get as we are invading in winter. And then in the rear is Xanthippus himself. Bit of an older man, in his 40s now, so his beard is getting a little grey. But the rest of his armor is glistening under the rainy sun of Laconia. Gonna be very interesting to see how he handles his fight. It seems as if he's hell-bent on sticking to Greek styles of warfare because he knows the Punic forces excel at it. So why change a formula that isn't broken? He begins though by sending forward the Numidian cavalry. Now these are proper Numidian CAV. So they'll be extremely fast, very stealthy, and they have good melee attack and defense skills. The only thing they lack is armor. But pretty quickly they will clear the mountain that was in the middle of the battlefield and find the Romans hiding out in the corner. So while they're doing that, our army continues marching forward, again in this column formation. This is something you probably don't see in too many battles, and that's because we usually need larger battlefield submod. So we actually have to make the effort to march towards the enemy. It's not as if we could just go in a massive wide formation and then that's that. Although the Romans are more than happy to just sit still and wait for us, so they are in battle formation. They have lots of spearmen and swordsmen in this army, so the swordsmen are the main concern. They have their very large shields that you can see here. Basically takes up their whole body. They have helmets. Some of them have cuirasses on their chest, but for the most part they're not going to be too well armored once they get past the shield. So the Romans should provide a solid defense for the city, but I mean, the professionalism of the Carthaginian armies cannot be argued with, surely. The formation marches towards the Roman formation, and then we actually split out into a predetermined battle formation, basically just a large wall of hoplites. We'll have our Iberian Scutari on the far left and right hand flanks of our army so they can do some mobile maneuvering very quickly. But for the rest of the battle, we're just going to be forcing our hoplites forward. Xanthippus, being the true Spartan general that he is, will lead the men from the front in the center. He will be at the farmost section where the combat should be happening, at least in theory. And then, as I said, Iberians will be on the left and right hand flank. In the front up here, you'll see some Balearic Slingers as well. In the far rear, we'll be keeping our Carthaginian Sacred Band. And then on either side of Xanthippus we'll have Punic hoplites and Greek hoplites respectively, splitting them into 2 divisions. Xanthippus leads the army forward of a war cry for the people of Carthage. While he is a Spartan, he is dedicated to whatever cause it is that he is serving, and he is serving the Carthaginian people, and he knows it. The battle begins with our Balearic slingers forcing the Romans to come off their small hill down onto the flatter terrain. They'll engage the levy archers and slingers that have been forced to fight against us. Their morale will be quite low because they're being forced to fight us, and they're just not very good. They don't have any armor at all, and they don't have the skill that our slingers do either. The only thing that they do have is that they're firing faster than what our slingers can, so they will get a little bit of damage in, but they're focusing their fire on our hoplites, which isn't a good idea because they are firing from the front, and our hoplites have massive shields and good armor, so they won't really take too many losses from the enemy skirmishers. Although the Roman infantry now begin pushing forward with their large shields, providing some cover. However, the captain of the garrison has marched forward with his own personal bodyguard, and instead of sitting and commanding his army, he's actually trying to lead from the front, which is commendable. However, he is doing it in an extremely foolish way by charging directly towards our flank, and he'll be outflanked by our cavalry extremely quickly. We even have time to bring our other Midian CAV unit all the way from our left-hand side of the army to the right, and then they will both come out here and surround the captain, and kill him quite easily. So, quite clearly, a very inexperienced captain, and the rest of the garrison troops are not much better, to be honest. You'll see how kind of silly they get here very soon. Speaking of silly, the archers are just standing here taking a absolute beating from our Balearic slingers. They're going to be routing pretty shortly. We're doing some aspects of concentrated fire, although not entirely. We do need to spread it out a little bit. Meanwhile, the actual melee engagement begins with the enemy forcing civilians to charge directly into our hoplite wall. It's no surprise then that our hoplites take absolutely no damage at all, let alone any deaths, and then they will wipe out those civilians and then begin pushing forward across the entire front line. The Romans didn't commit their full army to fighting us for whatever reason, so we are going to have to advance in battle groups. So you see most of my hoplites have at least a second unit next to them. The right hand side of our army though will be a little bit more of a line, while the left hand side folds, almost like a hand folding, and folding further and further the harder you kind of push your hand. So the right hand side of our army pushes forward, and now it becomes our center, which is kind of awkward to explain, but essentially the Romans only engaged our center right and our far right hand flank. So our left hand side of the army is already outflanking, and we have our Iberian Scutari up here fighting the Roman swordsmen. This is where our Iberians will begin to take more casualties, as the Romans are pretty good. Even though they are just militia units, they are still well trained and equipped. Definitely something to be respected. However, the enemy has absolutely no cavalry now and no spearmen to protect their flanks. So our Numidians will circle around the Roman positions, use all of their ammunition with their javelins, and then they will then begin doing some pretty severe rear charges against the enemy. Despite not being shock cav, their rear charges will be lethal. You can see the enemy is stuck in a pretty large grind out fight, which is exactly what we want because we have hoplites, and that's what hoplites are going to be good at. Grinding the enemy down, tiring them out, not taking too many losses while that happens, and then they can still maneuver the battlefield by quite literally pushing the enemy out of their way. Pretty quickly, once the Numidians begin charging from the rear along those red arrows, the enemy garrison ends up routing from the field, and then Xanthippus leads a charge to try and hunt down as many Romans as he can for revenge for the Greeks. Xanthippus proves himself to be a worthy Spartan general. And we have a decisive victory. It wasn't unexpected. It was just a small garrison after all. However, it shows just how effective Xanthippus can be, in addition to how well he has chosen his army. The hoplites performed excellently, took hardly any losses. The Scutari were very mobile, and they won against the Roman swordsmen. Slingers did fantastic, killed the enemy skirmishers without any losses. and our cavalry was quite versatile and did its job. There was absolutely nothing wrong with our army. Everyone did what they needed to. We lose just around 100 men in taking the city of Sparta, but we do just that. We take the city of Sparta. Now, there was some debate amongst Xanthippus and his sub-commanders for some time on what to do with Sparta itself. But, as I said earlier, Xanthippus was promised command of the Greek forces in the area once it was liberated. So, to liberate it, we must control it, though. Sparta can't last on its own independently, and thus, Xanthippus will begin the reclamation of Greece by controlling Sparta in the name of Carthage. But ladies and gentlemen, that's where we're going to end the episode today. I really appreciate you all joining in and watching. Apologies for missing a video last week. Hopefully next week we'll be able to get one out on time. And once again, I want to give a very special thanks to modders Manco and Swaraj. Swaraj was specifically responsible for allowing us to have a submod that adds Xanthippus to the campaign, because Xanthippus is obviously not a vanilla DEI feature. So thank you so much, Swaraj. Manco responsible for the awesome soundtrack you've all been able to enjoy while listening. And then we have our YouTube channel members Stefan Parrott, Evernight, and HK. I appreciate you all for your continued support to the channel. But anyway, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all so much for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I shall see you in the next one.